Okay, can I formally welcome everyone to the Social Development Committee this morning. Apologise for the delay for witnesses coming to give evidence or officials coming to give evidence on other matters. Just the committee was meeting in closed session there, so thank you for your patience. Could I just ask everyone in the room to please switch off their electronic devices, and our members in particular to remember all the protocols around the electronic devices that we have, the tablets, and could I ask any member to declare any interest relevant to today's agenda? None to be declared. Then moving on to apologies. Want to note that Dolores Kelly sent her apologies. Any other apology to record? None other to record. Then we move on to the draft minutes. It's on page 10 of your pack. Members content ratify the minutes for the meeting on the 15th of May. Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. Chairperson's business. Just members will be aware that the 2014 Survey of Services is now underway, and I'm advised it's important that all members reflect on the services provided by the Assembly Commission and please respond to the survey. The closing date for that survey is the 6th of June. Okay, thank you. Matters arising. Just a couple of items here. First of all, just to remind members that a private annulment was laid with the Business Office in respect of the Statutory Rule 133. Respective habitual residence following the vote on the 15th of May and previous discussion on the 20th of March. Prior to the rule being made, the debate on the annulment has been scheduled for Monday the 2nd of June. And I was just, there will be obviously a debate in the Assembly, and the committee officials will circulate material relevant to this debate later this afternoon. Just so that just putting people on notice that that's scheduled. Okay. Just again, just to touch briefly on the issue there that we have a number of many meetings before the summer recess, and there are quite significant agendas to be completed. So just to kind of give notice that the committee sessions will last quite a bit longer than they have been doing to date. Next week's evidence session relating to the inquiry will involve Donald Hoodless and Professor Roberts, Chair of the Housing Executive Audit Committee. To accommodate their attendance on this date, it's necessary to hold a session in the afternoon. The normal committee business will take place in the morning as usual. A lunch will be provided about 1 o'clock, and the evidence session will commence at 1:30. Just could urge members if you could try to attend that particular session. Again, just to deal with the proposed additional meetings, or certainly how we conduct a review of the inquiry. You know, members could just touch on that there very briefly. So could I suggest that we will schedule then, our members agreeable then, we schedule Tuesday the 10th to review the evidence that we've received to date in respect of phase 1 of the inquiry and decide our way forward. Are members content with that approach? That still allows then, hopefully then, if we can complete them, we'll also then have to deal with phase 2 with the view to efficiently complete that, and then to make a new start for phase 3 when the business resumes immediately in September. So we're going to deal with that on the 10th of June. Members content with that?
And we are going to put a timeline to the end of the inquiry.
Well, I certainly would be wholly in support of that. Wholly in support of that. Okay. Members, thank you. Yeah, I've just dealt with that. Okay. And we'll come back to that, the final scheduling for all of that. Again, then, it's just to remind members that the Policy Forum NI is holding a housing conference on the 12th of June. We've already dealt with that, and a number of members are actually due to attend that. Okay, members, thank you for that. Then moving then into the committee inquiry phase 2, the evidence session with the housing executive officials. You have on your folder on tab A of the inquiry folder, members, just to draw your attention to that. We have this morning Trevor McCartney, Director of Corporate Services of the Housing Executive, Ms Gay Ireland, Head of Corporate Assurance Unit Housing Executive, and John McVeigh, Head of Internal Audit. Can I formally welcome yourselves to the inquiry this morning? Yeah. Again, members, just to remind yourselves that you have your information in your inquiry folder. And you can relevant information and maybe some questions that people want to ask. So let's get it. Change our folder. Okay, members, so you have all your papers. The members have your papers and prepared of an examination. Okay, members happy with it? We can commence the inquiry. Okay, can I just be informally welcome yourself to the inquiry this morning then, and we're in the evidence session now, so if you want to, I think you would have been asked to deal with certain matters in respect of the inquiry, so want to leave yourself to make any opening remarks.
Okay, thank you for inviting us here. Just to do some quick introductions again, Kevin Carney, Director of Corporate Services, joined the organisation in January of this year. This is my Head of Internal Audit, John McVeigh, my Head of Corporate Assurance, Gay Ireland. With your permission, I'd like to go through the brief and just take you through the key aspects of that. Beginning with the introduction, on the 5th of May, the committee received a briefing from the top social development members of the Housing Executive Senior Management Team regarding actions taken to address concerns about governance and contract management within the organisation. This briefing outlines the role of the organisation's internal audit and corporate assurance unit in terms of improving governance and addressing the feelings relating to procurement and contract management. To talk briefly about the rules of internal audit and CAU within the Housing Executive's governance framework. The governance framework comprises systems, processes, cultures and values by which decisions are made and functions undertaken to deliver the highest standards of housing services in accordance with the organisation's duties and responsibilities. In terms of the rules of the internal audit and CAU that they have within the organisation's governance framework, that includes the annual review of effectiveness for our governance framework, including the system of internal control. The Head of Internal Audit's annual assurance statement for the period provides an opinion on the organisation's control environment. The Corporate Assurance Unit provides assurance on the management of key risks and, through inspection, assurance on the management of response and plant maintenance contractors. Both units report findings, and the heads of both units attend the quarterly meetings of the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee. The Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee sees a summary of each component audit from internal audit and CAU. Both heads of units attend the Pre-Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee meeting with the Chair of the Committee, and both also have regular scheduled meetings with the Chief Executive herself. Final reports are sent to DSD and the Chief Executive of the Housing Executive as part of special accountability measures which are currently in place between DSD and the Housing Executive. And draft internal audit and CAU reports are sent to the DSD Director of Housing following 10 days of issue to directors. Final reports are also sent following issue to directors. The committee should note that the Housing Executive's Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee provides an independent assurance to the Board on the adequacy of the risk management framework and associated control environment. The Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee is chaired by the Vice Chairman of the Board and is made up of 3 further members of the Board as well as 2 independent members. The Northern Ireland Office, Audit Office and DSD also attend quarterly meetings. Going into internal audit, in keeping with its requirements as a non-departmental public body operating under Managing Public Money Northern Ireland, the Housing Executive is obliged to maintain an effective internal audit service. The Housing Executive Internal Audit currently provides this service operating under public sector internal audit standards. The main responsibilities of the Department are set out in its most recent Internal Audit Charter, which was approved at the April 2014 Housing Executive Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee. These are developing a risk-based audit strategy and audit needs assessment to provide assurance to the accounting officer through systematic analysis and evaluation of the Housing Executive's internal control system. Identification and evaluation of controls established by management and systems to achieve organisational objectives in the most economic and efficient manner, taking account of value for money. Reporting findings and conclusions and, where appropriate, making recommendations for improvement. Advising on internal control and risk implications of enhancements to existing or new systems. Providing consultancy service and advice where relevant, and providing input into counter-fraud and money laundering controls where required. In terms of contract management and procurement of plant and response maintenance contracts, the Internal Audit Department has carried out extensive work in relation to both contract management and the procurement of plant and response maintenance contracts. In the period from January 2008 to April 2014, Internal Audit carried out and reported on the following: 14 response maintenance related internal audit reports, 26 plant maintenance related internal audit reports, and 6 procurement related internal audit reports. In addition, internal audit carried out a number of more detailed investigative assignments dealing with specific governance concerns associated with kitchen contract management and maintenance issues in 2012. All of this work has been reported to the Housing Executive Senior Management Team and the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee, and progress in implementing recommendations arising is monitored by that committee. In terms of audit follow-up on areas of concern, audits receiving a limited or unacceptable classification receive a follow-up audit and a visit as a priority within the next 12 months to ensure any recommendations are completed. Issues relating to internal audit arising from the DSD follow-up review of governance. One recommendation which related to internal audit issues remained outstanding in November 2013. This was deemed as no longer relevant. 3 best practice recommendations specifically relating to the internal audit issues were noted as partially completed in November 2013 report, and actions have now been taken which will ensure that they are completed by the end of the 2014-15 financial year. Internal audit also carried out a compliance exercise on behalf of DSD internal audit to ensure that the actions reported by the Housing Executive in relation to all outstanding recommendations were accurate and complete. Internal audit recommendations from the Northern Ireland Audit Office report to those charged with governance 2012-13. The NIAO report to those charged with governance made 3 findings specifically in relation to the delivery of the internal audit service within the Housing Executive. The recommendation relating to the rotation of internal audit staff has been implemented. The recommendation that Housing Executive should consider whether it would be beneficial to bring in an independent internal audit expertise to perform systems audits on key computer systems is also in the process of being implemented. The Housing Executive has also taken steps to address the findings relating to the delivery of the internal audit programme. This included a strategy of substantive recruitment to fill vacant posts, additional temporary resources providing short-term cover, and the external procurement resource mentioned above. Moving on to the Corporate Assurance Unit. The Corporate Assurance Unit was set up in 2011 to bring together all the key inspection functions within an independent unit within the Housing Executive. Its role was later expanded to include championing corporate risk management and facilitating the corporate assurance process, and the unit has subsequently evolved through a series of strategic changes. As a result of these, the Corporate Assurance Unit currently provides annual inspection programmes over the following key business areas: technical audit. Qualified technical officers based in CAU complete annual inspection programmes covering all aspects of the Housing Executive's maintenance programmes, including plant maintenance schemes, response maintenance services across all 26 districts, heating installations, cyclical servicing and response maintenance, also private sector grants, including boiler replacement schemes. The programmes are designed to provide assurance to senior management and the Audit and Risk and Assurance Committee. Where issues of concern are highlighted, CAU offers a support package to assist local management to implement any recommendations that are made. Risk Management and Assurance Framework. The Assurance and Improvement Team completes an annual programme of inspections to provide assurance to management and the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee on key business areas, including land and property, housing benefit, waiting lists and allocations. CAU provides strategic direction on the current risk management process and manages the corporate risk register on behalf of the board and report quarterly to the board and Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee. The Corporate Assurance Unit also coordinates the assurance statement process, whereby directors and assistant directors sign off on a quarterly basis that they have reviewed the risks, controls and proposed actions for which they are responsible in the corporate risk register and divisional risk register. CAU has just developed an assurance framework which identifies areas where assurance, internal or external, is currently being provided on the controls in place to manage the organisation's key risks. In addition, this will identify the adequacy of the assurance, current gaps, and produce an action plan to address weaknesses or gaps. Key issues relating to CAU out of the DSD review of governance in 2010, performance measurement first of all. In line with recommendations made to the in the DSD governance review, that CAU makes greater use of data analysis to identify potential trends and areas of concern to direct their inspection work. The board approved that the role of performance measurement be transferred from landlord services to the independent CAU. In terms of heating, DSD's governance review recommended that CAU inspection programmes to cover NIHE's heating contracts. CAU recruited a gas-safe Oftek qualified engineer to enable the unit to provide assurance to the board and senior management on the management of the heating contracts. These inspections began during 2013 and 14, and a programme is in place to inspect heating maintenance and servicing of heating appliances within our housing stock. Prior to this, the Housing Executive's Housing and Regeneration Division carried out periodic inspections of heating installs and repairs. Recommendations relating to CAU arising from DSD follow-up review of governance. CAU has addressed the recommendation that the land and property inspection should be re-established with the aim of providing management with assurance that disposals are being completed in line with procedures. House sales in the Special Evacuated Dwelling Scheme disposals are now integrated into the CAU Audit and Improvement Programme, and moving forward, relevant areas in land and property will be delivered as part of the programmes. CAU recommendations from the NIAO Audit Report to those charged with governance in 2012-13. With regards to the comment relating to weaknesses in the management of response maintenance contracts, it was recommended that the Housing Executive should ensure that CAU visits enough districts on a timely basis to provide assurance that any improvements made in contract management are recognised, or if failings continue, action is taken promptly. In 2013-14, the CAU inspected all districts in line with the agreed programme. CAU has also addressed the recommendation regarding steps taken to ensure best use of the unit as outlined in the NIAO Audit Report in 2012-13. The results of CAU inspections have shown significant improvements. In terms of the response maintenance CAU inspections, these have been completed based on the 12-area office structure of the NIHE. Whilst 2 of the office inspections are yet to be completed to final report stage, the 10 which have been completed have all received a substantial or a satisfactory assurance. In terms of the CAU inspections on plant maintenance schemes, the results of our inspection programme for 2013-14 have shown improvements, with 13 reports provided with substantial assurance level, 1 report with a limited assurance, and 1 report with an unacceptable assurance level. This indicates a substantial improvement on last year's result, which had 11 reports as substantial, 10 reports as satisfactory, and 10 reports as limited, and 10 reports as unacceptable. Next steps. Following a review of the provision of audit assurance and technical inspection services in the Housing Executive, proposals on a way forward were approved by the Board in April 2014. Essentially, the preferred option is to merge the internal audit and CAU into a single unit while maintaining the technical audit inspection within it. Key benefits associated with this proposal include fully addresses the recommendations of the internal and external governance and contract review since 2010, one overall assurance plan with a clear idea of resource requirements whilst addressing current overlap and duplication and consistency in reporting, and a single team of single point of contact on audit assurance and risk matters. A seamless service with technical skills available to provide more comprehensive internal audit and assurance services. So in conclusion, both internal audit and CAU have played a key role in improving governance arrangements within the Housing Executive over recent years. In summary, internal audit would acknowledge that some improvements have been made in the areas of maintenance, procurement and governance under examination by this committee. This view would be supported by the results of audit work carried out, particularly in the last 12 months. The Head of Internal Audit's opinion on the system of internal control within the Housing Executive for 13-14 has been classified as satisfactory, and while there remain issues to resolve, it is encouraging that both senior management and the Board are committed to further improving and strengthening the internal control and assurance framework where required. The vast majority of recommendations arising from the DSD Governance Review in 2010 and the NIAO report issued during 11-13 have been implemented. Contract management and procurement, both plant and response maintenance, however, will continue to be key areas for inspection and monitoring, both internal audit and CAU in the future, to ensure progress is embedded across staff and contractors. The planned merger of internal audit and corporate assurance functions will enable our work to be delivered in an even more informed and efficient manner through active cross-functional participation between professional audit staff and expert maintenance technicians, as well as with staff and suppliers. This should enable better intelligence-led governance, reporting business areas, and provide strong assurance of this area going forward.
Trevor, thank you. Can I ask just a couple of questions before bringing in members? In terms of the dealing with the audit office concerns that they've expressed, you talk about merging the internal audit and the corporate assurance unit. Could I ask 2 things? First of all, how would that engage with the new asset management division? And are you satisfied, given the concerns expressed by the audit office, that merging those units will have the necessary resources? Because they didn't. Yeah, they weren't satisfied that they did initially.
At the minute, take the resource first of all. There's 39 people in both those teams. That's a significant number of people to be doing this kind of work. And if you look at what's actually happening at the minute, we're in a place where you could be audited by CAU one week and then internal audit the next week, so it's not always joined up. And what we're trying to do is refine the processes internally. So if we look at a risk-based approach, you want to pick out the big things that are causing you problems, focus on those as a matter of priority, and use your resource effectively and deploy it in that way. In terms of how it will link into the asset management function, there are processes now laid out, particularly in terms of the new contracts, which Gay could talk about, where we're looking at not just how we audit as a tertiary audit approach, i.e. the third level of audit going in, the final line of defence. It's about how we get the organisation up front so that they look at the contracts, they look at the pre-inspection work, and we understand what's happening at that point to avoid failures later on. And that's key to how it's going to work with the asset management function going forward.
So that's not an additional resource. Is that not an additional resource, but better use of resources? Is that what you're saying?
It's absolutely a better use of resources. Yes.
Right. Okay, Trevor. Thanks for that. Jim? Yes.
Have there been audit failures?
Yes, there have been audit
Extensive?
We have had one audit that from CAU that has come back with an unacceptable rating.
And historically, have you been plagued with audit failures?
I wouldn't say we've been plagued with audit failures. John can comment on this further, but in terms of the ability to get through the audit programme, that was a struggle. But one of the things that we now have in place, and it's key, is first of all the resources to deliver that, including technical resources that weren't there before. But secondly, KPIs in place which actually inform us early doors if there's going to be an issue with audit.
Just explain to us, what's the difference in personnel levels, for example, now as opposed to 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Well, in terms of the internal audit unit, the substantive resources, including myself, 15 personnel, and that remains the substantive personnel within the team. We currently have 12 substantive people in place, but those 3 posts that are either vacant or unfilled have been temporarily resourced through agency qualified staff. So we're operating at a full resource in terms of the complement of the team. That's actually remained the same over the last 3 years, to take the time frame in your question.
But there have been some quite significant failures in the last 3 years, haven't there?
Well, I think it's a matter of record that there have been significant challenges which Housing Executive has faced. Yes, that's correct.
And do those include audit failures?
In terms of the delivery of the audit service?
In terms of failing to identify problems?
Well, the internal audit department is one facet of the overall system of governance and control within Housing Executive. I think, as Trevor has identified, internal audit and assurance would almost in a sense be the third level. You've principally the staff within the ground, then you've got maintenance checking within the Housing Executive operations divisions, and thirdly you have both internal audit and corporate assurance coming in essentially to give a belt and braces overall assurance. So my view would be that issues have been identified within Housing Executive by the audit and assurance function and by management. And obviously it has been a challenging process to try to get on top of those issues and to move to a resolution of the problems which have been identified.
Have there been any deficiencies in the operation of the audit process or the corporate assurance unit?
The Audit Office report has identified periodically where there were delays in reports being actioned, and also where there was perhaps a delay in actually executing the annual programme. And I think in the brief that Trevor has set before the committee, some of the reasons for those delays and implementation issues have been identified within the internal audit department. Certainly in terms of resourcing, there's a strategy in place to address some of those gaps. And in terms of additional technical skills, we now have a call-off procurement contract which can identify specialist skills where that's not present within our team. So those issues were picked up as well by the DSD governance review, and in terms of the time frame to complete the implementation of those, that's due for completion.
But just take the point that the Audit Office talked about the delay in obtaining clearance for Audit Office for audit reports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
whose fault was that?
I think one of the issues with this was previously there was a system, I guess, where even as a Chief Executive Committee, they went through those reports before they went anywhere else. As with any report, you will get management challenge. That does happen. But what we now have in place, and that this is the important thing, what we have in place is a system where the audit reports go directly in draft form to DSD so they can see it. There will still be an issue to directors, and directors will have 10 days within which to challenge those reports. But what we're not putting in front of any audit report is anything that you could constitute as some sort of interference. We're just.
Well, was there a culture of interference from the senior management team?
Well, I think it's a matter of record that there were individual instances, individual reports where there would have been an excessive management challenge by the then senior management team within Housing
With a
Executive.
view to toning down findings?
Certainly to challenging the overall assurance opinion and perhaps some of the rationale behind the report. Yes, that would be the case.
If we look at the governance structure that's in place now, both the individuals here have direct access to the Vice Chair as Chair of the Audit Committee. They go to a meeting where they discuss those reports and have the opportunity to put questions to be put to the committee without even my presence there. We also have Northern Ireland Audit Office and DSD attending that committee as well, so we have external.
So if we hadn't had this culture of interference, would some of the problems which befell the Housing Executive have been avoidable?
I think it's possible that there would have been an earlier sort of systemic action to identify some of the problems. If at the time when initial indications of the difficulty, particularly in the maintenance contract side of our business, have been identified. I mean, I think this is a matter of record. Audit Office, the Public Accounts Committee have looked at this issue.
Well, was the audit role being frustrated? Was the work of the internal audit unit being frustrated?
I wouldn't characterise. I've been in the head of internal audit and Housing Executive for 6 years, going back to 2008. So I would have been in place for a lot of the time that some of these issues have been that the committee's looking at. It was my experience that there was not a systemic attempt to thwart the role of certainly the internal audit department that I headed up. But it would have been my experience on a number of limited occasions where there would have been what I would characterise as an excessive management challenge to the reports coming out of my own particular unit. And I think it's a matter of record that some of the technical inspection functions which are now centralised in the corporate assurance unit would have experienced an excessive management challenge to their findings, particularly in the response maintenance side of the business, but latterly on the planned maintenance side also. And that was part of the rationale. In fact, it was one of the main aspects of the rationale to create an independent corporate assurance unit to ensure that.
But how independent is it?
Currently,
Yes.
it's very independent. If you look at the governance structures and safety mechanisms that are in place, first of all, we have the reporting structures I've already talked about, where draft reports without anyone internally having a chance to go through them go straight out. We have direct access for both these individuals to go straight to the Chief Executive, and they have regular meetings with him, and to the Vice Chair, who is Chair of the Audit Committee. So those things are in place now. The management challenge that was there in terms of a regular Chief Executive's Business Committee to review audit reports is no longer there. That doesn't happen. So they do have a very high degree of independence.
But were some of those who were raising the challenges seeking, in my terms, to thwart some of the work? Were they at the rank of people who are still having that oversight role?
Well, the challenge would have been to give some explanation, as Trevor has referred to. The senior management team and Housing Executive is called the Chief Executive's Business Committee, or CXBC for short. And the process were with the audit pack, if you like, of reports which have been going to the quarterly audit committees. How it would have been processed would have been pulled together, and then, but before it went to the audit committee, it would have been considered by the senior management team as a collective group at a special sitting of the Chief Executive's Business Committee. And there were a number of occasions where individual reports dealing with maintenance issues would have been reviewed at that meeting with the senior management team collectively in place. And this is a matter of record. I believe it was covered in the Audit Office Value for Money report looking at contract management, where individual reports were challenged to the extent where the report would have needed to have been asked to have been reconsidered before it was presented to the Audit Committee in its current format.
Toned down.
That would have been, that explicit instruction would never have been given, but
That was
certainly
the import.
to rethink perhaps some of the findings within the report and to reconsider.
And did you do that?
There was one specific report which was challenged quite heavily involving planned maintenance at a senior management team meeting. The logic and some of the findings behind the report needed to check, and the members that they had, the manager within my team that would have needed to have given me the answer then was absent at that particular time. So there wasn't the time to bring that report to its final format and present it to the Audit Committee. It went to the next Audit Committee, which happened to be 3 months later. Now, to prevent that situation arising, as Trevor has explained, one of the key recommendations for improvement has been put in place is that all draft reports were forwarded then to the Director of Housing in the department, and that ensures, and also that the Audit Committee is briefed concerning any draft reports which have not yet been presented to the Audit Committee, Audit and Risk Committee, which are then due for reporting. So in that way, the Audit and Risk Committee can identify what work is pending and can make sure that work is brought.
So members of the senior management team were pulling rank. Is that right?
Well, they would have been at a director level. So in terms of rank or structure, seniority, yes, they would have been in a senior position. But nonetheless, it was my job as the head of internal audit to make sure that the accounting officer was briefed on all issues. And if necessary, I did have access to.
Who was the
audit
accounting
chair.
officer?
At that stage, he's no longer, he's retired now.
What was his role? What was his job title?
Well, he was the chief executive.
Chief executive.
Yes.
So the man who heads up the senior management team is the accounting officer to whom you were reporting, and part of the senior management team were trying to thwart your work.
It's difficult for me to characterise their thinking in terms of exercising that challenging role, but nonetheless, that would have been, I would have been asked to consider the report and to come back.
Just one other question. In 2013-14, the Corporate Assurance Unit had very positive ratings. 100% of those reported on for response maintenance, 80%, 86% for planned maintenance. Yet just the year before, 62% of districts inspected were given limited or unacceptable ratings. Are we to believe that there had been such a dramatic improvement, or were you easier satisfied in 13?
That's a fair question. When we saw those results coming through, we know reasons why they would be better. We are working with contractors differently. We do have better ways of working in landlord services. But to be sure, what I've asked is for John to actually audit the work that was done by CAU to make sure that we're comfortable with that.
Has that been done?
We're doing that at the minute, but early indications are that we're happy.
Thank you.
Before bringing Zombie in, I just want to get back John a wee second ago, because I appreciate perhaps the position then, but you're using language like challenging. Now, you're saying about there were challenges, but we can then extrapolate that into other reports, audit reports, for example, which were saying that there was, I may have made up the wrong word here, but interference or suppression of reports, to change reports, change the nature of them. People involved in that, or person involved in that wasn't named in the report, but you know where we're going on this. So, in terms of us being satisfied as a committee, because we're dealing with a particular, reference for this phase of our inquiry, so in order for us to get confidence in what you're saying about improvements, and as we go forward, those improvements being sustained, we need to have an understanding that Because if you're telling me you referred to a specific meeting a while ago there, where there was a challenge made, it wasn't addressed, how do we get confidence if yourself, for example, appear to be suggesting that you were aware or were concerned that there were problems with the process? Did you report them on? Did you complain about that? Did you raise an issue around that? I'm not focusing on you personally, but I mean, you're there for X number of years.
Yes, that's
So I
right.
need to have confidence in what you're telling me now about how we go forward.
I understand.
So did you raise these matters, which have subsequently been certainly been reported by the audit as serious fundamental concerns? So I'm trying to work out, well, who was actually doing anything about these concerns when someone in your own position and your own evidence identified some of those problems? So can you elaborate on any of that? 'Cause, I mean, that was really relating to making sure reports were changed
Yes.
to get a better rating than what was actually deserved. And those are very serious questions.
Yes, indeed. Well, we're talking about a period at that stage around 2010, setting a context. Really, we're dealing with at that stage, the principal issue that Housing Executive was working through was the Red Sky issue. And at that stage, the Audit Committee would have discussed with myself issues which were coming to their attention regarding response maintenance principally. And I would have been working with the Audit Committee, giving them principally beginning to look at investigative issues at that stage. The Audit Committee would have been aware in 2010 certainly of some of the emerging issues in terms of how the audit and assurance protocols were operating. The committee may be aware also of a report that actually was not presented to the Audit Committee and Housing Executive in 2007, looking at land disposal issues. And that report was not presented at all, even though it was compiled as a draft report. That would have been a year before I would have taken up a position. And there was more unease once I was able to identify this in terms of what had happened with this report, about how the Audit Committee had not been presented with a report at all. The report, which had been challenged on the maintenance issue, did go to the Audit Committee. Then 3 months later, they had full sight of that and had sight of the draft report as well. So the Audit Committee were very supportive in terms of getting an understanding of some of the challenges that the internal audit function at that stage was finding, and the response maintenance technical inspection unit, or RIU as it was known, repair inspection unit, was then transferred out of the housing and regeneration division attached to the internal audit to ensure that it had independence of reporting, because it was principally looking at the issues surrounding response maintenance, which was the Red Sky contract business. Okay. Now, once the committee then began to realise just the difficulties it was experiencing in receiving intelligence audit data on technical maintenance issues as well as internal audit reports periodically, then steps were taken then to make sure that reports were coming to the Audit Committee in a transparent way. So one initial step was the attachment of the RIU team to the internal audit unit, and laterally the creation of the corporate assurance unit. Other steps were taken to make sure that all draft reports were brought to the attention of the Audit Committee, both in terms of a specific report, which is brought to the Audit Committee now identifying all draft work and plan work in progress, and as well that draft reports then, once they were issued to management and had a 10-day clearance period, were then issued directly to the department. That ensured that not only the Housing Executive Audit Committee, the department in its oversight role also was able to track not just final reports but draft reports as well. And so those were important steps, and then so collectively they were steps to try and improve the governance, and in my experience that has greatly helped, and the Audit Committee would be particularly vigilant now, not just in terms of the data that they do receive, but the process of collating that data, what data is imminent in terms of 3 months in that stage and so on. And because obviously they have learned from experience, and I think the point was made earlier that perhaps this would have helped to, had these steps already been in place, that would have helped to maybe pick up issues and action them at an earlier point in time.
Okay, John, thank you. Sammy?
Just if I just go back to where the point you left off with Jim, where you were talking about the fact that very often these audit reports were reviewed by senior management, and in fact there were examples where they were changed. Can you give us a flavour of the kind of changes that we're asking for?
There were two reports that were specifically identified. I would not characterise this as a regular occurrence. It was the meeting of the senior management team once a quarter was obviously a regular meeting. There were two reports in 6 years that were particularly identified from the internal audit department where there had been what was characterised as an excessive management challenge. The first one is the maintenance report, which is looking at planned maintenance issues. The report was brought in initially with a limited assurance opinion. There were questions raised about the validity of some of the data which led to that opinion. I'd gone back to check and some of the issues, but the team that had been working on that, the senior manager then, was off on sick absence, and I wasn't able to get the answers in time to get the opinion here for the committee meeting that was pending. We were able to go back in 3 months with additional clarification on some of the issues, and the opinion was brought to the audit committee then at the next scheduled meeting. The report, which was looking at land disposal issues in 2007, which is the year before I took up post, report had identified problems over the control over land disposals of Housing Executive land to ensure value for money. The internal audit report had identified flaws in the process and had challenged the rationale behind some land disposals. That report was a draft report and it had a limited assurance, I believe. I need to check that, but it certainly had raised concerns. And that report was not taken to the audit committee in 2007 at all. It had been compiled as a draft and then was not taken. Now, this point was raised both by Audit Office and then laterally by the department in their overall governance review 2010. And that was the issue relating to that report, is the recommendation which has not been closed off. The reason we can't close it off is that individuals that were involved in discussions about the report have all left the organisation. We've been unable to determine the rationale. But the important point is that the controls which have now been put in place ensure transparency over the compilation of reports at draft levels, I've explained, final report level, and the draft reports themselves are issued to the departments. There's a belt and braces approach now to ensure that there's a transparency over all assurance and audit work, to ensure the audit committee have full knowledge of exactly what are the issues they need to be aware of.
So interference in one case stopped the report being published altogether. In the other case, where once the data was provided, was the status changed from limited to something different, or did it remain as what it was?
It was changed at my decision from limited to satisfactory. I am confident that the correct assurance opinion at that time was a satisfactory audit opinion. And that was reviewed by Audit Office at that time. The issue would have been, though, in terms of making sure that the audit committee were aware even of a draft opinion, and that is also something that the audit committee are made aware of now in terms of the report status provisional opinion. And if there was a subsequent change, they obviously would want transparency over the rationale behind that change. Audit opinions can change within draft. That's not an uncommon process within the audit environment. And also, actually, management do have the right to raise a question or to challenge a report in terms of ensuring that there's a logic behind the findings. That's very important, and that's a normal part of business. The key thing, though, is that the challenge doesn't become almost an excessive challenge, not because the validity of the report is not accepted, but because, in a sense, there's not a willingness to listen to what the report is actually saying, almost a suppression, and that's obviously something to guard against. And certainly one limited example, it appears that there were some problems with that on the internal audit side of things, and there were also some issues with the response maintenance and plan maintenance technical inspection reports. And those are issues which obviously are a matter of record.
See, just on the progress to date, and I mean, Jim had mentioned some of the dramatic changes, but looking at the planned maintenance contracts, in 2012-2013, you sampled 41 districts. In 2014, 13-14, you sampled 15 districts. Now it seems that you sampled the ones which have done fairly well in 2013-14. Why such a difference? Because, you know, we moved from 10 being unacceptable and 10 being limited to 1 unacceptable and 1 limited. But I mean, were the poorly performing districts filtered out of this?
I'd probably refer you over to my colleague. That's really her side of the business.
I mean, you're talking here about response maintenance,
Planned maintenance, yeah.
as opposed to planned.
No planned maintenance.
On the planned maintenance side, I mean, from I took over and took up the post in June 2011, there were a number of staff changes and different staff moving into the unit. During a series of strategic reviews, we replaced a large number of these staff with staff that were more qualified, and we embedded a lot of support techniques in working with the staff on the ground. And I have found that the staff on the ground are, you know, keen to do the right thing. They had a willingness to listen and, in fact, wanted the best for their tenants. So, around that time, the then director of Design and Property Service instigated a whole training programme. So all of the staff, the project managers on the ground, were trained. So you had us trying to do improvements with the frontline staff in that they were trained. We were working with them, and this was why I believe this is why we have a difference coming forward now, that we're starting to see the benefits. With regard to,
I don't know if there is a difference, because you have 15 looked at as compared to 41. We don't know if the 10 that were limited and the 10 that were unacceptable are still limited and unacceptable, because they're not included, or at least peers are not included in the figures.
well, what happened prior to this year was that we looked at all of the districts. So we looked at all of them, and that was how it came out. The next year, a few were omitted. And that was on a risk-based approach. It was taken to the audit committee, and that was because they were well-performing districts. What has happened this year is the districts have been amalgamated into areas. So while it looks like we've only looked at 12, we have inspected every district as part of the 12. So some areas might have 2 districts and some might have 4 districts. And what we have done, though, is looked at all of them. So for the current programme, my staff have a fully comprehensive methodology that we look, and primarily key to that is looking at the actual what's happened on the ground, and we look at that with regard to finance, if we were overcharged, and with regard to the quality of the work carried out by the contractors. Now, that has improved. Our staff are working much more closely with contractors. We have as well exit meetings and indeed opening meetings. I would attend all the exit meetings where we go through the issues, where we talk about them, where we inform staff across the whole of the province. This is the key findings, this is what you need to look out for. And in fact, we do that for planned as well as response. I would attend all these exit meetings. It gives staff the opportunity to air any concerns that they have, and also for us to share knowledge. We also, for the response side, had a debriefing session, if you like, about a month ago, where there was over 200 maintenance officers there, and we went and we told them what had been happening on the ground, what we'd found, what we intend to do moving forward. We have a lot of buy-in and support from staff on the ground, so that is why why the scores have changed. One, it's an amalgamation. We looked at what exactly are we looking at, how are we, from a methodology point of view, how are we scoring what we actually find, are we being robust enough in our scoring mechanisms, and I believe that we are. And what we also did for this year's programme is where we identified any issues, where we found something that wasn't quite right or someone that needed additional training or an agency staff, we worked with them, we offered support. My team stayed and we worked with them, and we made sure that moving forward it doesn't happen. We make recommendations, we actually go back and check that those recommendations have been implemented, and that's why you're seeing the change. The same with the planned maintenance, whereby there has been a number of changes. There's been a lot of training given to staff. We have been working with them. However, it's the tail end of one of the contracts. So there isn't so much happening until the new consultancy-led agreements come on board. But nevertheless, we've been working. We have our programme that goes to the audit committee. We have been inspecting on the ground, and the report appropriately sent to both DSB and the audit committee.
Well, I'm just trying to get my head around the whole process here, but the first call I take are the trained professional maintenance officers in the district offices who go out and look at the work. Then you've got the CAU, which will look at the work that they've done, and then the internal audit, who will look at the reports which come from the CAU. With all that structure, I don't know how many people are involved in that structure.
That's actually a very good point. One of the things that we are trying to do, and your question's well made in the sense that there are a lower number of audits, but they are more precise in terms of how we've chosen them. So where you have satisfactory level of assurance, you don't audit them as frequently as you would. But when you have the level of checking that we're currently operating under, it makes it difficult for staff to get ahead of themselves. It makes it difficult for us to work with contractors. And that's one of the reasons why in the merger of corporate assurance and internal audit, we're trying to streamline that whole thing. Because at the end of all of this, there are tenants, and those tenants need work done. And while we check, we're probably spending less time getting that work done, and that's where our focus needs to be. We still need that level of assurance. That has to come. It has to be there. But it needs to be more precise. And that is what will let us get into the business where we're back doing business.
Yeah, well, that's a question I was going to ask then. With all those different levels, you've professionals who are employed as maintenance officers, you've then got the supervision of that through the CAU and the inspection of that through the internal audit. And yet in 2000, I'm just taking one as the repairs inspection unit, even with that, in 2011-12, 3/4 of the districts were found to be limited or unsatisfactory. In 2012-13, half of the districts found to be limited or unsatisfactory, and there's been none in 2013-14, which I hope is a genuine improvement. What is it about the housing executive that even with all that level of supervision, strata after strata of supervision, you still had those kinds of measurements of unsatisfactory outcomes?
The observation I would make is that you cannot legislate for individuals and individual behaviours, but I think the important point in all of that is we found it, and in finding it, there was action taken, which has now resulted in that significant improvement at a later point in time.
But this wasn't individuals, this must be systemic. And I mean, is it as a result of the question that Jim Allister asked earlier, that from the very top there was a tolerance of it? And indeed, not only a tolerance of it, but a desire to, when it was found out that districts and it wasn't the performance you would have expected, that there was attempts to cover it up. And at the end, of course, as you said, it's the tenants who lost out, and the public purse.
I can't comment on some of the observations you've made, but what I will say is that when we look at how we do this now, all the improvements that we have in place, every single one of them is as a result of the things that we've found so far. And we're not finished yet. We still have work to do. But the important thing is what we do from this point hence. And what we have in place is a risk-based strategy, which will eventually be more technology-driven, so you'll get early warning that you can't argue with to any great extent, and a process and a governance structure in place that means reports aren't in the position where anybody can play with them or change them or do anything with them. They are what they are. There will still be management challenge because opinions can vary. If you look at any audit function in any world-class business, there will be management challenge. But in terms of the integrity of the process, this is absolutely where it needs to be now.
Ram Khan.
Chair, just a couple of questions. Some of the stuff has already been touched on. And so we understand that the Gateway 5 review is completed, and although the final report is not yet available, we understand the review team did consider that the contract management assurance regime appears to be restricting the ability of maintenance officers and contractors to act within the spirit of the contract. Could you comment on that?
If you look at the Gateway 5 review, the one thing that really hits you very clearly is the extent to which we are over-checking and the process has now become onerous. And in that, it's not a good place for any of us to be. It makes it hard to work with contractors when we want to work better with contractors. It makes it hard for internal people to look ahead of themselves because they're constantly looking in the rearview mirror. The recommendations coming out of it are clear. We need to get better at this, and this is exactly what I've said previously. When we have a risk-based approach and when we're more precise about what we're doing, we have clear methodologies, we have governance structures that keep us safe in terms of those methodologies, and perhaps even more importantly than that, we have a culture where people want to get better at this, and that's one of the things we're trying to instill in both these organisations now. That's the most important thing for us.
And he's saying, and I'll go on to say what I believe it, he's saying that within that there has to be a degree of flexibility. First of all, to get the job done, and secondly, to ensure that it is done within the broad parameters of what's been laid down.
There should be parameters, there are KPIs, you do need to check things and they need to be done right because there are health and safety implications and all of that. But people make mistakes, they're human, and what you have to do is to understand that a mistake is something to be looked at from the point of view of training, development, of how you stop it happening again, but not from the point of view of making that person, that individual, that business, that organisation, putting them on the back foot. We're trying to create a culture here that is a constantly learning organisation. That's important to us now. You'll have heard in Journey to Excellence that is key to our strategy going forward. If we don't have that, this will always be where it always was. We're making significant gains on this. We know what we need to do. Gateway 5 review is the validation of that by an external source. That's what we're trying to drive for.
Well, let's jump back a number of years, because sometimes when you look at this whole thing, you try to put your finger on where did it all begin. And have you been able to put your finger on where the rapid set in is? There's some people would say a lot of it started in around the introduction of economic contracts and summer restrictions. That was part of that. And even in terms of planned maintenance, because Mike Egan was all about more for less, and that was the whole thing. But with that done, it ended up an argument between district offices and contractors over and above the additions. And because I remember standing in the hallway, and Red Sky was the contractor at the time, and the Panels Hall had been dug up. And the argument wasn't about not only fixing the leak or repairing the damage, but how much they were going to get for that individual piece of work. And the woman sat for 6 weeks because the contractor refused to do any work, didn't they? That seemed to be prevalent across certainly West Belfast now, and that's where I live. I take it that's all been removed now.
It is well documented. The spirit of the Egan contracts was misinterpreted to some extent. There was a level of flexibility there that shouldn't have been there. In terms of the NEC3 contracts that are there now going forward, they operate properly, but we still end up in a place where we account for things like compensation events. They're clearly documented. There are no swings and roundabouts in any of this. It is the case that you get what you're paid for. If you do something else, you get paid for that as well. If you don't do something, you don't get paid for that. It is that simple going forward.
And back to, do you see in terms of last year's announcement about the £18 million, right? Did that originate from your offices? Or particularly, was I thinking it came from audit office?
Well, my team were not involved in the quantification of the £18 million figure. The work that internal audit did would have been, I believe, around sort of 2011, 2012. We would have been focusing at that stage on the response maintenance issue. As I think I explained earlier, the repair inspection unit, which is looking at response maintenance, was detached from line management to work for my team for a period of time. And at that stage then, the corporate assurance unit was set up, and the planned maintenance inspection function, or scheme inspection unit, SIU, was then also detached and placed within the corporate assurance unit. So it was looking then at both response and plan maintenance. Upon Gay's appointment and assembling her team, issues were brought to Gay in terms of the plan maintenance concerns, allegations really of concerns over plan maintenance administration, and Gay brought that to the Investigation Strategy Group, ISG. It's a group within Housing Executive which considers whistleblowing allegations and allegations of possible fraud and misconduct. Okay, so Gay had brought concerns to that group concerning plan maintenance initially. My team was asked to examine the issues that Gay had brought to the ISG team. We did that on a pilot one scheme basis. And based on working with Gay's team and looking at the issue ourselves, we felt that there were possible concerns over poor quality of work overcharging on that one scheme. Okay, so at that stage then, the ISG team, which was the senior management team, then asked for further work to be done, and eventually that further work was done by outside procured quantity surveying professionals. And once they had done a far more substantive, wider examination of a wider number of plan maintenance schemes, there would have been a process within Housing Executive to quantify the potential overcharge figure. We wouldn't have had the quantity surveying skills within the internal audit team. We are financial and audit professionals, but we didn't have that specialist knowledge, so that would have been done by other areas of the business, and that was where we would have essentially stepped out of the process. So initially, for want of a better word, kind of a due diligence on the initial concerns that had been brought out of the corporate insurance team, but the quantification and extrapolation work, which would have ended up in a end figure, if you like, would have been done by other parts of the business.
And who stepped in to take that forward?
Well, to my knowledge, it was carried out by it would have been managed by the director within the Design Property Services division at that stage. They would have had responsibility at that time for plan maintenance, so that officer would have, that division would have been responsible for collating a figure, or working on the collation of a figure, an estimated figure, if you like.
To see just because I remember at the time that there were quite a number of community organisations in West Belfast, and a number of political, certainly the MP had raised the whole question about Red Sky, and at the time that the Red Sky contract was going to be suspended, it's then I think that it was withdrawn in the contract. Were you involved in that, or were you advising anybody, and why was that decision taken?
Okay, I was appointed in June 2008. Yep. Okay, my understanding of.
So I think we're nearly moving into phase 3, because this phase is actually around the committee has to satisfy itself. I mean, the term of reference governing this is actually, are we satisfied that the actions taken to address the well-documented failings are adequate?
Okay.
That's what we're trying to. So I don't want to be straying on there, with due respect. I mean, I take. Were you referring there to the external people? Was that the Campbell Tickell, or was that the people previously to that?
No. In terms of the chronology, the initial allegations, whistleblowing allegation, if you like, was brought to the ISG by Gay upon her appointment, and that was the correct process. We were then asked to carry out a due diligence quality assurance exercise. We did it in one scheme, and then brought our findings back to the ISG team. That would have been at the beginning of 2012, I believe. Once the ISG team had considered our report into the matter and had satisfied themselves that there was an issue that needed to be taken forward, then the quantification, if you like, extrapolation of the potential overcharge figure would have been primarily taken forward by the Design and Property Services division at that stage, and that would have been they would have done that through the help of external quantity surveying professionals. And then following that, I think in 2013, then Campbell Tickell were then procured to review the overall set of issues, if you like, and they would have had access to the analysis done by the quantity surveying professionals. So they would have taken that data and then, I guess, done their own work, if you like.
Can I just on the back end, to see the the expertise in quantity surveying and the initial thing when it left your office and went to the design office. Would that have been done as part of a tender or a contract, or were people just approached and asked to come in?
The work of my team was all internal within Housing Executive, but we would have relied in terms of, say, we wouldn't have had a quantity surveying knowledge within the internal audit team. We'd have relied on the technical professionals that were in Gay's team, and would have worked with them on a one-scheme basis. Would have done site visits in the one particular scheme to have a look at the issues, but that would have been all internal. The wider issue in terms of bringing in external quantity surveying professionals, my understanding that would have had to been procured through the normal procurement process.
Who were they?
From memory, I think a firm called Murray MacDonald, but I would need to check that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Was that the McDonald report?
Murray MacDonald, yes, that's right.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay, Ryan, you happy enough with it? Any other member? No other member indicating to speak, Trevor and your colleagues. So, is there anything else you actually want to finish off with, if you like, any other remarks you want to make in terms of the section so far this morning? I mean, obviously members will take time to reflect on what we've heard today, obviously, and just review all that, but I mean, that's just part of the course we do after every evidence session. You're happy enough then you've made your case and addressed members' questions so far? Okay, then could I then thank you, Trevor, Gay and John, for attending here this morning and dealing with that the way in which you have done. Thank you very much for that. Okay, members, then moving swiftly on.
See your point as a councillor.
Okay, moving on then to the June monitoring round. We have a departmental briefing, as you're aware, member. We have Andrew Hamilton, Ian Snowden, Jim Wilkinson and Stephen McMurray here this morning. And I could just refer yourselves, members, to the additional tabled items on the main estimates provided by the Committee for Finance and Personnel. And just advise yourselves that the advisors will also provide some additional information on these. So could I formally welcome yourselves here this morning, and give yourselves the opportunity then just to brief the members on the June monitoring round and the main estimates.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss our June monitoring round proposals with the committee. Kevin also copied to me I think the recent paper from the DFP about the 2014-15 estimates, so I'll make some comments about that at the end, which may help your consideration of that. As you said, I have my three colleagues here this morning. We're trying to ensure that the business areas are covered, and it's really to help us with the deliberations. The Department's June monitoring round proposals are due to be returned to DFP by the 5th of June. The inputs from the main business areas have been compiled, and we have copied to those to you, but I just want to stress that the process is ongoing. The figures can and do change really up to the final minute, but what you've got at the moment is really the position as it was when we presented the proposals to you. But we are already aware of some changes, and we'll highlight those to you as we go through. The details of our proposals in the table are set out in the table that we sent you last week, and I'll just maybe take the opportunity to go through that in an overview, and then we're happy to pick up more detailed questions. The first bid is a housing bid of 15 million, and as we indicated in our covering letter, the co-ownership scheme remains the Department's main measure for supporting potential first-time buyers and those returning to the market who wish to purchase their own home but cannot afford to do so outright. The Northern Ireland Co-Ownership Housing Association provided over 1,200 homes during 13-14 financial year, with a total housing grant of 51.5 million. Baseline funding for 14-15 of 25 million will deliver 450 affordable homes, whereas the association has indicated that they had almost 500 applications carried forward in 14-15. So what we're suggesting is that a bid for additional funding of 15 million, if it's met, will help the wider economy, as well as constrain first-time buyers and those returning to the market. The 15 million would be sufficient for a further 360 homes. A substantial number of first-time buyers are now returning to the housing market, and they have increased activity, contributed to increased activity in the market, and helping to inject some confidence in the construction sector, which has led to the unlocking of some stalled developments. And I think that has been recognised really in our housing supply forum, which the Minister recently set up. For many first-time buyers, particularly from modest backgrounds, the average deposit of 20% remains a significant obstacle to home ownership. And affordable housing, such as that supported through co-ownership, helps address this barrier, and there remains a sustained demand for co-ownership in the economy. The second main bid is is from the Urban Group, and what the group has proposed is 25 million of capital bids, and this is to allow the department to complete a number of urban regeneration and community development capital projects across Northern Ireland in advance of the transfer of the powers to the new councils in April 15. I won't go into the details of those now, but Ian will take you through some of the details of those projects after I complete my overview. There's also a small non-cash easement of 1.9 million from the Social Security Agency. That non-cash easement stems from anticipated reduced requirements relating to impairment issues, and that money cannot be used for any other purpose and must be returned and surrendered to DF. There's also a reduced requirement of estimated at £7 million associated with housing benefit owner occupiers. We've been notified of that by DFP via Land and Property Services, who are indicating to us that the requirement is up to £7 million less than the current budget cover. Now, we might want to take a view on that, whether we confirm it at 7 million. It might be that we want to look at that in more detail over the next few days. This funding was given to us by the executive, who wanted really to protect those resources on transferring from AME to DEL, and we can't therefore utilise the funding elsewhere in the department, and it's ring-fenced, so it must be returned to DFP. There are then a number of bids associated with Together Building United Communities. The main one is a capital bid of 3.2 million, which is associated with taking forward the executive's commitment and priority to develop 10 shared housing neighbourhoods, and that bid represents the additional costs that are likely to be incurred in 14-15 in pursuing those developments. The other main bid really is on urban villages, where as part of Together Building United Community, there is a commitment to establish 4 urban villages, and those urban villages will offer opportunities to utilise innovative and visionary proposals to make a real and lasting change in areas that have witnessed years of decline, market failure and low social capital. There are currently 2 agreed villages in the Cullen area of West Belfast and the Lower Newtonards Road in East Belfast, and the bid reflects the costs likely to be incurred in taking those forward in the current year, really doing the detailed planning work that's needed before major change on the ground. So that's a brief summary of the Department's proposals for the June monitoring turn. I'm happy to take questions, but maybe Ian if you're content, Chairman. Yeah, well, yes, I'll cover that as well, but maybe when I've finished, Ian could go through the details of the projects.
Okay.
With regard to the main estimates, the document contained an annex which detailed the movements from the original budget allocation set out in the comprehensive spending view back in 2011. Now, the key thing really for the committee is that there's nothing new in this. It's just tracking the changes that have already taken place. The changes in resource and capital budget are quite small at around 2% net, and primarily relate to the additional budget allocations for housing through Getting Britain Building Scheme and boiler replacement. And there's some offsets from reductions for things such as contributions towards university fees. So those reflect decisions really that have been taken in the past. The main difference overall relates to a technical adjustment of £141 million for resource, and this is primarily due to the reclassification from AMI expenditure to DEL for housing benefit rates relief budgets for owner-occupiers and tenants. And that was, if you recall, that was transferred from AMI into sort of the resource limited DEL. And that was since the budget was agreed at way back in 2011. So if that helps, I hope that helps you with your consideration of that. If, again, we're happy to take any further questions, but or provide you some more detail in writing if that's necessary.
You suggesting Ian would?
And Ian,
Yeah, the bid of £25 million capital for urban regeneration really is three packages of types of projects. The first package is about improving community facilities, I think for over £10 million, and that roughly split about 50% each to sporting facility upgrades and then community facility upgrades, refurbishment of community centres and so forth, and a small amount of money in relation to play areas and neighbourhood renewal areas mainly. The second package is in relation to creating quality public spaces in our towns and cities. That includes 14 environmental improvement schemes in North and West Belfast. Improvements to parks in Londonderry, that's a brick park in the city side and Waterside Greenway. And on public realm improvements in Londonderry, just over £1 million. And then major public realm schemes in Cumber, Donaghadee and Limavady. And the third category is about enhancing town and city centre competitiveness. Really what we're trying to do here is help improve trading conditions in towns and cities. And that's a package of about £1.9 million for urban development grants in various towns and cities. Revitalisation schemes in Banhinch, Limavady, Antrim and Randalstown. Those are quite small scale schemes in themselves, but quite impactful, especially after public realm schemes being delivered, where we work with traders to improve shop fronts and to deliver some form of promotional activity in those town centres. And then there's also the Bluestone Business Park in Craigavon, which is going for a further phase of development at that site. And those are the main parts of the package.
Okay, and thank you for bringing members. Could I just ask, the Assembly agreed, and it was agreed, I think, in March, that there would be 4,000 houses, additional houses built, social houses. And here we have another monitoring round where we're looking for money for, the department's looking for money for co-ownership. Nobody's against co-ownership at all. Good project. But where in the department's thinking is the provision for additional social housing, which everybody agrees is required, but yet we have no evidence at all. So here we have again it is a systemic approach from the department around co-ownership. So where is the addressing the social housing?
I'll ask Jim to go into the detail of that. Yeah. But it's starting from a standing start. There's a timing issue.
Yeah, but I understand that, but what conflict? We hear that all the time, so that's just off of what it looks back to me now, to be honest with you. We've heard that all of last year and all the efforts that the department was taking with the housing association and vice versa to address all the barriers. So we've been at a standing start for some considerable time, actually, so I really don't think that washes.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll give you the detail. We did look at this.
Very aware of the Assembly motion on the request for additional 4 over the CSR period, and the Minister's taken a number of actions on foot of that. In relation to this monitoring round, the Housing Executive didn't request any additional funding for social housing. The target for this year is 2,000, and you'll have already been briefed on the target. It's a substantive increase from last year's starts of 1,300. But the Minister was very mindful of the Assembly motion calling for additional homes. So our target for this year is quite high and is quite challenging. In the monitoring round, no additional funding was requested, primarily because there was a concern over the ability to deliver. If the money was requested and not spent, it's worse. What the Minister took on foot of the motion, he wrote specifically to the housing associations, asking them could they bring forward additional delivery and could they increase the number of units that they planned for this year, for 2,000. He also wrote to a number of executive colleagues, ranging from the Finance Minister to the Minister for Regional Development, because we're aware of a lot of issues around suitability of sites, and also the Minister for the Environment. Those ministers have responded. All are very positive and keen to help with assistance. But on the finance side, for example, it's difficult to commit to capital funding over a 2-year period. And most of the schemes and most of the funding we require to deliver a site would be over a 2-year period. So there's challenges there. The Minister for Regional Development has advised his department will continue to work with housing associations, but has not been able to provide specific assurances whether we can speed up the process, and we're waiting for a response from the Minister to the Environment. The Housing Association Federation has written back saying it would be extremely challenging, if not impossible, from a starting point of now to increase delivery beyond the 2,000 units. So against that background, it wasn't prudent to put forward any additional bid in this monitoring round, but rest assured the pressure is on. We're continuing to look at what we can do to bring forward additional sites. In particular, and I've had a briefing from members before, we've done some pilots with Fold Housing Association and the Housing Executive to look if we can do some small-scale competitive design and build, as that's a way of bringing developers forward who are ready and will deliver and then hand over to the association. And we're hopeful we'll be able to maybe lever in some more schemes that way. But at this point in time, we wouldn't have the confidence to put a funding bid in for additional capital funding and have the assurance that it could be spent and deliver more units this year.
Okay, thank you. Fra.
Tim, I have to say you're repetitive. See the last number of monitoring rounds, same thing. They're not ready to do it. They haven't got the capacity. But the next time we'll be able to do it. I think it's a disgrace that we're sitting here. That there's over 4,000 people in my constituency, hundreds of them in hostels and single lets, that are waiting on housing. And you're coming here telling us that there will only be maybe less than a couple of hundred houses built in that constituency, maybe less than 100. You're coming and saying that there are 500 people on a waiting list for co-ownership, and that you've applied for 15 million, and that people in my constituency are going to be condemned to months or maybe years in the hostel.
Well, I can assure the committee, we've heard the committee very clearly on a number of occasions. We're doing all we can to increase social housing delivery. The target for this year is 2,000, which is exactly the target that the Housing Executive has advised in terms to meet need and demand. We're trying to increase capacity. Co-ownership is an entirely different scheme, I have to say. Co-ownership...
Well, it's not entirely different.
Well, it's not entirely different money, but the co-ownership scheme, we are able to bid because the individuals have gone and identified the homes, and that's why there's 500 people who have identified a home ready to move into, which is slightly different from building a brand new home on a site. We're working what we can to increase capacity. The reality is, it's not a quick turnaround in terms of new build social homes.
Okay.
That's even, isn't it? Because it's just bad.
Okay, and then Sammy.
Thanks for the presentation. I was going to ask about some of the detail about the urban group you've already mentioned. Ian has covered that. In terms of getting these schemes done, because neighbourhood renewal and that will be going to councils next year as well. In getting these schemes completed and refurbishing community centres and all of that, if there's money over, will that transfer to councils, or will they have to make their own bids?
Okay, the projects we've prioritised for this bid are those which we are confident we can get delivered within the financial year. So we have not included within this bid any projects where we're doubtful about the prospect of slippage on the projects. Now, having said that, if there's bad weather or there are procurement delays or some problems in a specific project, it is possible that it slips. In those circumstances, it would fall to the new local authority to pick up the rest of the costs. The entirety of our urban regeneration budget will go to the new local authorities from the 1st of April.
And are you confident that these schemes will be delivered by...
Well, yeah, as I said, we have only included those projects we are confident we would be able to deliver within the year.
The other question, the 3.2 million for shared housing, the Redmanville estate in Portadown is going to be presumably upgraded. And that. Is there plans to extend that to other areas?
That's not my area of responsibility.
I can deal with that.
Well, let's get it. Part of the Together Building United Communities bids, we sought bids for new schemes, but we also sought from the Housing Executive to look at their existing shared neighbourhood and identify any capital work. So they have a range of programmes. This is just the first that's ready for this year.
That's right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Salman?
Jim, I first of all say that I think that you were wise not applying for money, capital monies for new builds when it's clear that we can't deliver on them. But I've two concerns. First one is this: are we sure that the money which has been allocated to the existing capital programme is going to be spent? Because, I mean, the department has got a record of leaving it to the last minute before it declares surplus money, which it should have identified fairly early on that could not be spent on the new build programme. The second, so I mean, are you monitoring just to make sure that even the existing capital monies can be spent, because the record in previous years is it hasn't? Second thing is this: one way in which, and I would have thought there would have been some follow-up in this. You came here about, I don't know, it was September of last year, with a harebrained scheme to spend £10 million on purchasing houses to go into the social housing stock, and that you had to get it all back. And I mean, the committee at that time said, are you really sure that A, you can identify the houses, B, get through all the legal difficulties, and therefore spend the money? But it was a good idea. Has no, I mean, I take it work was done on that, houses were identified. If that was done, why is there no bid for that? Because that is something which over a period of a year you could have made a bid for, and probably could have spent, and wouldn't have dealt with all of the points that Fra McCann has raised, but it would certainly have dealt with some of the housing pressures on the social budget.
Yeah, I'll try to answer both those questions. On the first one, have we confidence of delivery and spend out what we've got? Well, we're very confident that the budget we have is the budget that's required to deliver 2,000 units. We also have some confidence this year in that there was a significant piece of work done last year in terms of advanced land purchases. So that land was purchased last year to allow developments this year. But it would be wrong of me to say it's not a challenging target. That's one that requires constant monitoring. So whilst we're looking at additional, we're also spending an awful lot of time this year to make sure we clear up anything that could halt the development this year. So as any issue arises, we try and address it through the Housing Executive or through ourselves.
It's just that, I mean, I'm sure all of us in our own constituencies are already beginning to get red alerts of housing schemes that we thought were going to be going ahead at an earlier stage than, and, you know, they're not often. We're still getting housing associations saying, oh, we're having difficulty with planning, we're having difficulty with this, that and other thing. And it's just that, I mean, I hope that the department is monitoring closely if there's going to be a delay. Because now, you know, it may have freed up some capital which then could have been used for the more kind of innovative ideas.
Well, I suppose just as it wasn't prudent to bid for money, any additional capital this year, because it was difficult to see if we could deliver above the 2,000 target, we equally took a very studied view with the Housing Executive that it wasn't prudent to surrender either, because we needed the funding that was available to deliver the 2,000 units. The department meets with the Housing Executive who manage and run the programme on a monthly basis, and we monitor schemes. Obviously, schemes do drop off, but that's why they're overscheduled. So we usually, to deliver 2,000 units, we'd be looking to have 3,500 units scheduled. The second question in relation to the buyback scheme, it was a fairly specific buyback scheme. It was a buyback scheme by the Housing Executive. Certainly there was a business case produced, so we made the initial bid because we thought it was a good scheme. All the properties were identified. Housing Executive were content that they could conclude the legal agreements. These were properties that wouldn't have been attractive to housing associations because there were one or two in the middle of a Housing Executive estate, and it wouldn't make sense for a housing association to buy them, to maintain them. Unfortunately, the business case wasn't cleared because ultimately it came down to the fact that buy these back for the public sector, purely as a Housing Executive, was still more expensive in terms of the cost of building the new.
That wasn't the reason we were given, though. The reason we were given at the time was that it couldn't be completed within the year. Are you saying now that even...
No, the reason, there was as time went on, we reduced the numbers of houses that we felt that could be completed. But the reason was that the business case failed the VFM test. It didn't get through DFP. And it was that precise reason that it would be cheaper to deliver those houses through housing associations because as new build, because they're, the public contribution was 50% of the costs.
The last issue I wanted to raise was just on the reduced requirement for the housing benefit for owner-occupiers. Now, I notice that you said that while there's an easement of 7 million, you're going to query it, and you haven't determined how much exactly will be given back. Given that we know these are people who will now have received the rates bills, we'll know who's eligible and who's not. If at this stage it's identified that there is an easement of 7 million, how much uncertainty is there? Because there shouldn't be a great deal of uncertainty. And why are we holding on to money again that could be returned to the centre, or thinking of holding on to money which could be returned to the centre and could be used actually for purposes which are maybe high priority at present?
We won't want to hold it. We're just saying we want to do a little bit of due diligence on it. And it's, if we hold something back, it's going to be very marginal. But it's just we haven't just completed that work yet.
Can I raise just one thing, just in terms of one of your questions, in terms of previous years' underspends? The last few years it's been to do with planned maintenance rather than new build, is where the underspend has come, and you heard earlier about the issues around planned maintenance, so that it was all tied up in that legal side.
Well, what applied to new build also applies to other housing executive spend, and I just hope that we are keeping fairly close tabs on it so that we don't get the kind of embarrassment, because I think it does damage the department if at the end of the year, especially in February, you're handing back stacks and stacks of money, which has been the case.
Well, let's hope the experience of last year was a one-off.
Okay. Jim, are you looking under?
Just a couple of quick points. Just on a presentational point, why do you not give us a table of easements and a table of bids? Would that not be simpler for us all to follow?
Well, we can look at that, Jim, if there's a difficulty with the
That's the way
presentation.
some other departments do it with their committees. I think it would be beneficial. Just on the point that Tommy Olsen raised about the maintenance thing. Yes, we had the saga last year of millions upon millions being unspent within the housing executive. How close a tab are you keeping at this moment on the housing executive?
A very close tab. And we've been through this in detail with them, they are taking steps to spend out their budget. They've given us assurances that they will.
On the planned maintenance, have they started to spend on
it? They're looking at different ways, as I understand it, in terms of not only how would you describe it? Is there extra things that they could be doing to ensure that the resources are all?
Yes, but the major contracts, have they started any spend on them? Before?
No, I think they're planning. What they've got is a consultancy firm. We're going to drop the schemes and planned maintenance work to start, I think, in the early or late autumn. But it's on that
early or late autumn.
It's meant to be July,
which has been at a standstill for, and I've forgotten how long. They had a budget for a full year's spend on it, so they're patently not going to spend all that money, are they?
Yes, as Andrew said, we've been meeting on a monthly basis with them, and they've assured us that they're able to spend, looking at the nature of the schemes they can bring forward. They're having discussions with contractors at the moment as they accelerate, increase the amount of work, and they're also planning schemes. So at this point in time, they're telling us they will spend.
When they got their budget allocation for this year, 14-15, it was on the basis of 12 months expenditure, was it not?
It was the basis of they might just be spent over 12 months.
Yeah. And now you're telling us it could be expenditure that won't start till maybe 4 months before the end of the financial year.
Well, they're planning, as I can say, met them recently. They're indicating that they can spend out their planned maintenance budget.
In 4 months?
Looking at the nature of the schemes, looking at the extent of work carried out in the schemes, and working with contractors to accelerate.
Do you believe that?
They've provided us, as I said, it's not something that we're looking at. We're looking at it on a monthly basis. So
every month they assure you, but you know,
the expenditure.
Does that just satisfy you?
They would have profiled their spend in the latter half of the year, and they are the people who have the experience, who have the professional knowledge and all the rest of it.
So, Mr. Hamlin, you're putting your reputation as well as the housing executives on the line by telling this committee today that you're confident that they will spend all their planned maintenance budget in this financial year.
I'm reflecting to you that we have had assurances from the committee, or from the executive.
And you're giving us assurances.
And on the basis of those assurances, I'm giving you those assurances.
That it will all be spent.
That is the assurances that we have been given by the housing executive.
And that's the assurance you're giving us.
And that's the assurance that I'm giving you.
I see. Interesting.
Can I just follow up now? There's already slippage, by the way, because schemes that were meant to be starting in July, they're now saying, what you're telling us that they expect now to start, not to start till late autumn. I mean, this is an issue which I think really should be pursued rigorously with them, and it might be useful for you to give us a more regular update rather than just waiting until monitoring rounds, because I even doubt if there's the capacity. Don't forget, a lot of firms have had to lay people off because contracts were suspended and everything else. Is there the capacity in the industry? Because some of the firms that operate in my own area tell me that they don't have the capacity to ramp up in the way that you're talking about. I just don't want there to be... First of all, it's not only an embarrassment. The fact that money which becomes surplus is much easier allocated to useful projects the earlier on in the year. And, you know, maybe the housing executive don't want the embarrassment of having to say so early on in the year that they can't spend the money, but I really do think it is something which the committee should be regularly updated on.
I'm quite happy to do that, Chair.
I mean, I was just going to reaffirm that because I think you've had a clear message from the committee on a number of fronts, social housing provision, and in particular, and also very critically this issue of maintenance and contracts. Any other slippage. I mean, we're all local representatives as well, so we're aware of needs and particular tenancies and so on. So could I just urge yourselves to redouble the efforts to make sure that these assurances are absolute assurances and you're not just relying on assurance, that you're satisfied yourself. In other words, the next thing you'll be telling us you're satisfied, it'll be done. It's not just that you're reflecting their satisfaction, if you know what I mean. So is that fair enough?
That's fair enough, yes.
Okay, so I can then thank yourselves, Andrew, Stephen, Jim and Ian for your presentation here this morning. Thank you very much. Okay, members, moving on to the next item. You are aware the independent review of work capability assessment has been rescheduled to the 26th of June. And I think we have the we have Professor Litchfield actually coincidentally the following week, so it probably is timely enough that we're bringing those two briefings closely together. Moving on then, members, then to employer engagement. That's a departmental briefing. This morning with Brian Doherty and Jeremy Blairton from a Social Security Agency. You'll have the briefing paper on page 3 of your table pack. Page 3 of your table pack. Okay, so without any, just to make a wee point, because obviously the facts for all of the committees. I mean, we had a meeting with the CLG again, or just last week, and it's just been, and I know Malcolm McKibben's been dealing with this as well. So just in relation to the papers, timeliness of receiving papers, because we only received some of these papers the last couple of days, so you'll appreciate members will not have had the full opportunity to go through them as much as they would normally. So just take a wee caveat this morning from your presentation this morning. Members may not be, as I say, up to full scratch with the reports that they've received. So on that basis then, thank you, Brian and Jeremy, for your presentation this morning, and we'll do the best we can. All right.
Indeed, Mr. Chairman, and can I, as previous individuals within here, thank the committee for the opportunity to attend this morning to provide you with an overview of the research completed by the Social Security Agency in order to inform the development of an employer engagement approach on welfare reform. By acknowledging that the Welfare Reform Bill has yet to complete its journey through the Assembly, I know members will appreciate the need to undertake some preparatory activity, and engaging with employers will be a key element of universal credit, as has been the experience in live running within Great Britain. Enabling people into work is deeply embedded in a range of policy initiatives across government. The Departments for Social Development, Employment and Learning and Enterprise, Trade and Investments corporate plans emphasise the Department's role in contributing to the Northern Ireland Executive's main priority of growing the Northern Ireland economy. And I'm pleased to inform the committee that, with this in mind, a cross-departmental working group was established with representatives from the agency, Enterprise, Trade and Investment, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, and Employment and Learning to progress the development of an employer engagement approach. Universal credit, which will be a major part of welfare reform, has been designed to ensure that it pays to work. However, it is not only necessary to engage with claimants looking for jobs, but also to successfully engage with employers. The introduction of universal credit will impact employers in several ways. Firstly, the interaction with Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs real-time information system. Secondly, the scope for employers to recruit and retain employees on different and increased hourly work patterns. And thirdly, the increased demand for employment opportunities, as it will be a condition of universal credit that claimants who are able to work should work. Northern Ireland-specific research was undertaken to inform the development of this approach. 2 waves of research were completed, the first by the Analytical Services Unit in the Department and the second by PricewaterhouseCoopers. The employer insight was completed through participation in focus groups and interviews, and its purpose was to establish an understanding of the levels of awareness amongst employers, the challenges faced, and how they might use the opportunities presented by universal credit to recruit staff in the future. Results indicated that there was limited awareness of universal credit and its connection to real-time information. There was also a commonly held view that universal credit would only impact the unemployed, and this persisted for some even after the inclusion of tax credits was highlighted. Universal Job Match was welcomed, though employers were unsure how this would be used for recruitment, and challenges highlighted by employers were to a degree influenced by the size of the employer and their familiarity with real-time information. In general, it was agreed that universal credit has the potential to work better than the current system. Most of the employers agreed that the introduction of universal credit could offer greater opportunities, such as a more flexible workforce and larger pools of employees. The impact and likelihood of employers increasing hours or creating many jobs depended very much on the type of employer. Examples being the construction industry and manufacturing and food industries, which may be less likely to create many jobs due to set working patterns, health and safety restrictions or initial equipment and training costs. However, they may be more likely to offer additional hours. As part of the research, a number of case studies were also completed. These were drawn from employers interviewed during the stakeholder consultations. These case studies represent the experiences of employers of different sizes within different sectors, provide examples of issues being faced and suggest how universal credit could potentially address barriers within the current system. It is clear from the research that was completed that employers will require substantial information and support prior to and throughout the introduction of universal credit. The Department is committed to providing this, and within the Social Security Agency, the Organisational Change Directorate, in partnership with the Universal Credit Programme, is using the research findings to develop a welfare reform employer engagement approach for Northern Ireland. Work is continuing with partner organisations to ensure the approach meets employers' needs, and the final document will be shared with the committee. I hope that very brief overview has been helpful, and along with Jeremy, we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, Brian, thank you. It may sound a silly question, but I mean, you're going to some extent to engage on the fields of welfare reform, and as you said yourself, that welfare reform is not yet a bill. So, I mean, I'm just making an observation. Your report there, you talk about sending out a final brochure version of the welfare reform employer engagement strategy. But how can you do that? Because remember, the department printed at quite a cost some leaflets a year or more ago, and had to be thrown in the bin. So, what assurance can you give us that you're not going to be precipitous?
I can assure you we're not in any way going to issue anything at this stage. The Department's been undertaking research of in some way or other around welfare reform since 2011, and very much around customer insight type search, around awareness of welfare reform, what potential changes would mean, and that has been ongoing, and we completed another bit of that recently. So this is really sort of part and parcel of that research, recognising that it is just going to be claimants, but it is also going to be employers. And it is to inform what communications we will use when the appropriate time comes that we are allowed to fully engage with employers.
Okay, Brian, thank you for that. Mickey Brady.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Brian. I mean, obviously all this is predicated on the success or otherwise of universal credit. Now, the reality is, the evidence from Britain is that universal credit simply is not working, it hasn't worked. But to date, I think that at this point in time there's supposed to be 1 million people on their database. I think there's about 3,600, all single males because they're the easiest apparently to put on. They've already written off 142 million on their pilot scheme in terms of the IT. So it's simply not working. So obviously your feelings will be predicated on the success of the system, and you know the system itself simply is not fit for purpose. So, you know, it seems we're talking about something that, if it ever were to come about, it would have to be completely revamped. Because nobody, and we go back to the whole welfare reform, nobody disagrees the underlying principle that it's better to work than to be in benefit. But it's how that system is then imposed, or how it works. I mean, one of the things in your key messages there, I think, talks about removing the 16-hour rule, allowing staff to increase their hours, leading to better productivity. But there's been major issues in Britain, particularly about 0 hours contracts. So, you know, will that open the gateway to zero? And some of the cabinet ministers in Britain have already spoken about people being forced to take jobs with 0 hour contracts, otherwise they will be sanctioned. At this point in time, that isn't an issue. But you know, you can see how it's working towards. So I'm just wondering, have you factored into account in all of this the fact that it's simply the whole concept of universal credit, which may have started out, it's a bit like transforming your care, a vision without the appropriate action following, and that it simply is not working. Will all that be factored in? Will that be taken into account? Because, as the Chair said, there were a huge number of leaflets issued in terms of welfare reform. I think it cost something, we asked the price was about 59,000, caused tremendous confusion in local offices, certainly in my own constituency, and they simply weren't appropriate. They were totally inappropriate, actually. And that had been flagged up with the department beforehand. So it's just to flag it up again, that, you know, any information given has to be accurate information. It has to be on the basis that universal credit might actually come about. But, you know, that hasn't happened as yet.
Absolutely, I'm very aware of that, Mr. Chair. I suppose maybe just in terms of universal credit and where it is generally elsewhere in the UK. There's actually just over 7,000 people who are now on live running with a...
But with respect, there's supposed to be over 1 million on at this point.
And I do appreciate that was indeed to be the case, and with a further 90 offices in GB to start taking the single under 25-year-old claimants, as Mickey has alluded to, with a view to couples coming on board in June and then families coming on board in October. It continues to be part of the development of the system. But I think irrespective of where universal credit as a system develops, part and parcel of this is how employers are engaged in that process. And really what we've done through this research is to try and get an understanding, as indeed was the case in GB, what the impacts would be for employers, because they're so important in terms of creating the jobs that you allude to, Mickey, and making them aware of what some of the challenges might well be for them. And the research hopefully has highlighted, yes, there are some challenges, some maybe not full understanding around some of the benefits that universal credit will bring to them. And through some of the focus groups, there was, I suppose, a bit of a mixed bag in terms of understanding, but also employers starting to see the benefits of this. But that is all predicated on the fact that we don't have a welfare reform bill, We know that we haven't got universal credit in Northern Ireland, and we know that universal credit has the potential to change in terms as they move forward and they start to learn. And the assurance that I can give is that we're fully engaged with colleagues in DWP, and any of those changes will be reflected back. And indeed, what we've been doing with employers, and Geraldine very much leads on this side from the agency's point of view, is what the engagement that they've been having with employers. You're already here in Northern Ireland, especially the large companies like your Tesco's, your Aldi's, your Marks and Spencer's, those types of employers whom they've been engaging with. But I can give you that assurance. We're not planning to go out with anything at this stage in any way. And indeed, we may, as I said, sort of maybe towards the end, once that information pack that we have pulled together, we will be coming back to the committee, and I would suggest that will be before we go out.
Could I just make one point, Chair? We've had numerous officials, basically going back to 2007, since I've been on the committee, and more recently, of numerous officials before the committee trying to explain the intricacies of universal credit, and in many cases failing abysmally, no fault of theirs, of course, because they're simply regurgitating what they've been told from the DWP. So I'm just interested in how employers who really don't have any necessarily concept of the benefit system, how it's being explained to them, when officials who are explaining to some of us and all of the committee, and some of us, and most of us, have some idea of the benefit system because we work with it in terms of constituency work and that. Just wondering what the success rate has been or will be in terms of trying to explain a system like universal credit to employers or would-be employers.
Well, I suppose that's our challenge, or should I say it's more so it's Geraldine's challenge.
Certainly a challenge, yeah.
Could I just add as well, obviously my team are working closely with DWP who are currently engaged with employers, so we'll take that learning of how complex messages are taken across, what's the learning from that, and obviously that'll influence the way that we will design our engagement approach.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any no other members indicating to speak? So you get an easy touch this morning, Brian, surely. Could I thank you both for being here this morning? Thinking that the members haven't had a chance to read your feedback, so there may well be questions at a later stage to come back. But made the point that you both will be engaging with the committee on an ongoing basis anyhow. So could again, Geraldine, I thank you, and Brian, thank you very much. Okay, members, moving on then to the next item, which is proposed subordinate legislation. We have the SL1, the Social Security Recovery Balance lump sum payments. This is on page 68 of your pack. This is a proposed statutory rule. I intend to read them all. It's expected to come into force on the 1st of July 2014. Our members content that the rule will be made. I think that is an agreement, yep. The next one is the SL1, the Child Support DB Reciprocal Arrangement Amendment. Again, this is on page 73 of your pack. This would be due to come into force on the 20th of June. Members content that this rule will be made? Yep. Thank you very much. Moving on then to the SR 138, which is the Child Support Pensions and Social Security. It's a commencement order, so just ask the members then to note that. Moving on then to the next one, was SR 140, Social Security Maternity Allowance, miscellaneous. Just to remind members that there was information sought on that, and members are saying that they actually haven't got the responses that they had hoped for. Well, the clarification of that actually hoped for or expected. Any suggestions? Go ahead, Maggie.
No, just this rule applies to women who are now, work with spouse or partners, self-employed, and it also would apply to self-employed women. So there's a bigger group than this particular thing might deal with. What we asked the department very simply was, where it said that a woman has to have due care of her health, what that meant, and they haven't come back with anything. Now, obviously, there's another group before this particular group and before this particular piece of legislation was put forward. So they haven't. Surely there has to be some criteria for due care of health. Does it mean that if a woman smokes when she's pregnant, is she taking due care of her health? if she drinks a bottle of vodka a day, when she's pregnant, is she taking due care of her health? Or is it some sort of an arbitrary thing that somebody, civil servant, decides, I don't think you're taking due care of your health? There has to be some criteria, and that's all we ask for.
Wanted to get the department in to
I think
explain.
the department should be asked to explain what the criteria is.
Okay, so the members agree then and invite the department to give that explanation. Okay, thank you for that. Moving on then to the next item, which is correspondence. And obviously there's, you have a memo there, you have the page 123 of your pack there, and you'll have page 123 is that the Committee for Employment and Learning has written to the Social Development Committee asking if the committee wishes to comment on relevant clauses of the Work to Families Bill. I don't know if members have an opportunity to look at these clauses. Clauses I'm advised will be of interest to the committee in that they do relate to maternity allowance and social security law. If members wish to respond to that, comment on it, it will be done in the next couple of weeks. The committee will allow the committee to respond before the deadline of the 23rd of June. So if members should take note of that. We can also issue a nil response. So if members have any views on that, they can let us know. And we can do that. As needs be. On the understanding people have read then the correspondence, the members can send the note to the correspondence by the memo. Okay, agreed then on the forward work programme. I just noted mentioned earlier on the department briefing on the response to the Litchfield's review. WCA has been rescheduled the 26th of June. Okay, and again, we've considered earlier on in relation to the inquiry, so the forward work programme will be adopted or amended rather to reflect that. Okay, so on that basis, if no other business, on that basis then the meeting stands adjourned.
Just in relation to the conversation we had with the department officials, I do have some concerns more here about the maintenance contracts as to the ability of the housing executive. Could we write to the housing executive simply asking them to give us a profile of the spend of their maintenance allocation this year? What month do they see it starting, and how much do they see being spent each year or each month to the end of the year? It might give us some indication as to, and certainly let them know that we're on the case too.
I mean, I would endorse that. I think it's important that we do that, and I think we should also ask the department to give us at least a written report month on month, even throughout the summer. Because, again, I was struck by Andrew's giving us his assurances on the case that he was giving assurances. So, that's.
It's just another issue around that, and I think this is the third or fourth Mullen round that we've been talking about as an association to capacity the whole thing, and yet to all accounts, when you speak to senior housing associations, people, they were saying that the obstacles in their way that it cleared that they would have looked at. But we read to the ANIFA and asked just to explain what has been said here this morning again.
Okay.
And asked their first answer.
I'm happy enough that. I mean, I guess fair enough. Very appropriate. Okay, that's agreed. Okay, then, so the members of the meeting's adjourned then until next week, 5th of June, 10 a.m. Thank you very much, members.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly.